Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on diversity and inclusion with me, Beverly Clark, as your host, and a range of panelists whom I will introduce shortly. I'm the CAS National Community Manager responsible for the management and delivery of the Computing at School Community of Practice programme as a part of the National Centre for Computing Education, the NCCE. This webinar is part of a series of collaborative webinars designed to support the CAS community. Today we have partnered with Microsoft Education. During the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. The top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. There is also a copy of some of the webinar notes available to download during the session, and these are available under the handout section. If using social media, please use the hashtag CASInspire20. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce the presenters to you. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you should have my screen in front of you, which says Diversity and Inclusion. So the first presenter is myself, and I'm also hosting as we go through today. Then we've got Peter Kemp from the University of not from Roehampton, previously from Roehampton, which is where I first met Peter, but from King's College London. Then we've got Louise Hayes from Manchester Metropolitan University. And as I mentioned, this bio of all the presenters is in the handout section. Then we're joined by Wendy McLeod, who is part of the CAS Community Outreach team. We're also joined by Rebecca Franks, the Learning Manager from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Asini Lienge from Microsoft. So Asini is an intern at Microsoft, and she'll be speaking to you about that later on. We're joined by Kojo Hazel, a PE teacher and an MIE, Microsoft and Education expert, who will speak to us also. And closing the show will be Jennifer King, the UK Schools Engagement Lead for Microsoft. Okay, so I'm now going to hand you over to Peter Kemp, who will take us through changes in the curriculum and social mobility issues and looking at gender and performance. So Peter, I'm just swapping the screen to come across to you.
What can you see?
Can't hear you yet. We can see your screen, Pete. And I can hear you.
I think it's that one. Okay, are the slides showing?
The slides are now showing, yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about this. Getting used to so many different systems, sharing things online. So yes, very welcome. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about diversity and school computing, with a particular focus here on the GCSE in computer science and the curriculum change in England. So if we can go to the next slide. When we talk about diversity in computing, you normally see these figures. These figures are the number of females who are taking the GCSE computer science in schools in England. Roughly about 1 in 5 GCSE students are female, and 1 in 10 A-level students are female. And I'm going to make a comparison here, which I'm going to come back to, which is the old ICT curriculum. The old ICT qualification was, this last iteration, 43% female. So we've immediately seen here, with the curriculum change towards computer science, a subject which is a lot more kind of male dominated than the previous kind of digital qualification in that space. And if we go and look at all digital qualifications at Key Stage 4 for students who are 14 to 16, we're seeing that since the curriculum change, girls have been disproportionately affected in terms of their access to any sort of digital qualification at Key Stage 4. So the figures here, as you can see, are from 2017. I'm hoping to update this shortly, but this is the year that ECDL was still there, and ECDL was pretty much 50-50 male-female. So you get rid of ECDL, then the number of girls taking a digital qualification at age 16 is going to decrease even further. So certainly the curriculum change in the last few years has been quite quite damaging to female uptake of any sort of digital qualification. And I'm just putting this graph here as well, which is the number of hours of education happening in school, and so a number of hours of computing education happening in school. And as you can see, the numbers have decreased significantly since 2012, and likely to decrease a little bit further, though we've obviously leveled out for Key Stage 3. And you're seeing a reduction in hours of computing being taught in school, but not necessarily impacting males the same as it's impacting females. So females are, as I say, being a lot more disengaged with the computing revolution of the last 7 or 8 years, which is worrying. And this is, as I say, looking at all digital qualifications, not just the computer science qualification. But that is one type of diversity, and we need to start really questioning what we mean by diversity. When we talk about diversity in computing education, as say, we have a massive focus on female engagement, which is right, because as you've seen, the numbers are pretty appalling. But there are many other forms of diversity that we need to be paying attention to. And if we start just looking at who can sit the qualification, this graph here shows all the schools in the country broken into 10 groups based on the poverty level of the school. So the community that the school is serving, how poor those students are. And as you can see, that amongst the poorest group of schools, the 10% poorest group of schools, 66% of those schools are offering computer science as of last year. And the richest group of schools, 93% of those schools are offering computer science. So depending which community you're in, you're going to have different access to community. So socioeconomic factors are a huge factor here in terms of just access to a computer science qualification. If you're not in a richer school, you're far less likely to be in a school which offers computer science. And we can start breaking this down in other ways too. Sorry, this graph, this is actually from a report that I'm writing at the moment. It's a little bit messy, but we have our comprehensive schools, non-selective state schools at the top. You've got comprehensive boys schools, comprehensive girls schools, and the difference between the kind of the offering for those schools is 90% of students in boys schools have access to computer science as a qualification, or theoretically have access to computer science as a qualification. Well, if you're in a girls' comprehensive school, it's about 76%. So if you're a girls' comprehensive school, nearly a quarter of those girls are not going to have any computer science qualification happening in that school. So there are real factors here restricting students from taking this qualification, even if they wanted to. And then I'm going to talk now a little bit more about the students who are in schools that do offer computer science, and actually who takes them who takes these subjects, because it does get a little bit interesting. So this graph here, if you just focus on the left-hand side for the moment, you've got in 2016, I'm hoping to update this quite soon, but you have students in schools which offer computer science who actually takes it. And we're breaking down the student population into 10 groups, with the richest being number 1 and the poorest being 10. This is by something called IDACI, which is so similar to Pupil Premium, but it's about the poverty level of the area that you come from, not about your parental wealth. It's the poverty level of the area that you come from. And as you can see, the richer the male population, roughly the more likely they are to take computer science. So that's not a good sign. But rather interestingly, if we look at the bottom line, this is female uptake, this kind of reddish line. You can see the poorer the female population, the more likely those girls are to be choosing computer science. So when we say that, yes, okay, girls aren't very well represented, there's something quite strange happening culturally with these students choosing to take computer science. So 7.2% of the poorest group of girls in these schools are taking computer science, compared to only 5% of the richest. And there will be some probably very interesting cultural stories behind this, which we need to explore. We haven't explored these yet. And if you go in obviously another angle on diversity is around ethnicity. And we've broken it down. This is the kind of governmental breakdown here in Asian students, Black students, Chinese students, mixed race students, and white students. And you can see that for females, the lowest bars are actually in white students. So amongst all the groups of females taking computer science, actually white students are the worst represented female group, with Chinese students being much higher represented, though the number of Chinese students is very low. And these bars aren't hugely significant in terms of the statistical explanation, but you can see that it's actually what we saw in the previous graph with this line going this way is explained mostly by this group of white females. So white working class females, this group on the right, are more likely to take it, significantly more likely to take it than the kind of the middle class peers that they have in the same schools. So when we look at gender, we should be talking about ethnicity, and when we look at gender, we should also be talking about socioeconomic factors and combining them all if we can, because these are also ways of looking at diversity. So it kind of links in with diversity, because I think this might start to explain some of the knock-on effects later on when females don't choose to go into the industry or choose to study this as a career. But when we start to look at how females do in computing and how males do in computing, the picture is very worrying. Now, computing is one of the hardest courses in the, out of all the courses to get a good grade in. And what this is showing is it's showing for all the computer science students who took computer science and another subject, what was the difference between their computer science grade and their other grade? And as you can see for media at the bottom, computer science males taking media got 0.87 of a grade higher on average in media than they did in computer science. For females, it's 1.44 of a grade higher in media studies than it is in computer science. So the system is telling males and females that they're bad at this subject, but in particular, it's telling females that they're bad at this subject. And you can see the figures here, they're mostly leaning towards females doing worse. Now, kind of the caveat here is that females do better at computer science, but they do better at every single other subject. So what we try and do is you try and control for their grades in other subjects. So let's imagine we can compare a girl and a boy with exactly the same sort of grade profile. You would find that for computer science, the boy would be getting nearly a third of a grade more. So the exam system seems to be geared towards telling girls that they are better at other subjects. Now, this is quite a worrying trend, and if you kind of read the research in terms of self-efficacy, if you're told that you're not very good at a subject at age 16, why on earth would you go and study more of that subject or think about a career in that subject? So I think this is a really important finding, which I'm hoping to explore a little bit more later. You'll notice I've got ICT bang in the middle here. Everyone says that ICT was really easy. Well, it wasn't, and actually girls and boys did pretty much the same. So as a subject which could get girls and boys thinking about digital careers, ICT was quite good for that, but computer science is going to be disproportionately putting off girls. And that's my big fear, and hopefully I'm going to be doing some more research in this area in the future. So serious disparities in access to qualifications, which we've just seen. Exam system tells females and males to a lesser extent they have strengths elsewhere, which is really bad for progression. And the curriculum change seems to be less equitable for girls and working class students, certainly than where we were with the ICT curriculum. So the curriculum change seems to be forming some big problems with diversity. But girls still outperform boys, and the new curriculum has been around since 2014, so things might change. Hopefully that wasn't over a minute left. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete, for that. Some very insightful bits and pieces there, looking at how the curriculum has been damaging to girls and the groups by ethnicity which are being affected. Please do keep putting questions into the question window. After the next speaker, we're going to start taking some questions. So we're now going to move to Louise Hayes from the Manchester Metropolitan University. Louise is going to look at interventions and approaches to developing good practice, challenging stereotypes with displaced speakers, and a whole lot more, and promoting a variety of career opportunities. So I'm going to swap the presenter over to Louise.
Thank you. Okay. Can you now see my slides? I hope you can. Let's move this out of the way, and I shall maximize them. like Peter said, many systems. Many systems, many webinars. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for asking me to talk today on this kind of topic. Obviously, we are working remotely from home. I've worked at Manchester Met for a couple of years. I'm involved with the NCCE and also help support schools as a subject matter expert within the National Computing Centre for Education. We're finishing our teacher training course this week. So currently PGCE students are finishing in quite a different way than usual. And we are recruiting for next year's course too. So teaching does carry on, and if anyone wants to sort of ask any questions about that, feel free to do so. But I'm just going to sort of look at this. This has been kind of, as a teacher in the subject, and obviously a woman who's come through. I have had 3 different careers, and within them all, I've found IT back in the 1980s when I did a computer studies O-level, and was engaged in the subject at that time. My kind of life and probably a movement through careers is not that conventional, and so access to computing is really important to me, and it was as a teacher. So as a secondary teacher and a head of a computer science department for nearly 15 years, I always try to encourage, girls, and again, I know it's a wider issue in terms of inclusion into the subject. But I didn't actually find it that easy, and I sometimes thought perhaps that being a woman and being sort of female, I would be able to influence students. My slides have frozen, Beverly. I'm trying to get onto my next one. Here we are, just a little bit slow. Okay, so the figures, sorry, Peter's kind of these are very headline figures that I've got here, and these are taken from the WISE report. So Peter's certainly got more up-to-date data than I have, but this is a figure that we use with the student teachers and something that we talk about, and we do go back and compare kind of how ICT compared to computer science and what is happening in the subject. And the numbers are increasing. Girls are taking the subject more, but it's slow, and it's kind of not happening quickly enough. And this is a problem, and kind of what can we do about it? These are conversations that I have with trainee teachers about how we can kind of encourage and be aware of our position in the subject. I know that we're going to be talking a little bit about unconscious bias later on, so I'm not going to touch upon that, but we do have a session on unconscious bias where we look at what happens kind of in the classroom and how you can be encouraging in other ways and aware of the sort of language and the position that you use as a teacher. So it can be quite a controversial area. The discussions can get quite heated. I remember running a girls' computing club once, and the boys were quite offended by that, and it ended up being opened out to all. And so I think it's important to remember that it's about being inclusive and having an inclusive classroom, particularly. So those sort of figures there, you can read the slides, but girls do outperform boys at STEM. So this is taken from the Royal Society report, and again from the WISE campaign. And similarly at A-level, but obviously not as many girls are taking A-level, and then that picture kind of carries on through to degrees, that not many girls are moving in. Within teacher training, we are quite balanced, and we do get a lot of women coming into teacher training. So generally it's often a third. So at that point, and career changes will come into teaching. And so we do have more kind of women at that level at a post-grad qualification, which is quite interesting, and perhaps a study in itself. So what do we do with trainees? So this year we introduced in the programme sort of an idea of how we can encourage girls into the subject, looking at kind of other ways. And and project work such as real world projects, environmental projects, and this was something that we look to, we teach at year 9. So as a year 9 student, trying to encourage pupils to come into and select GCSE, what kind of things can we do? So real world projects are found to be quite engaging. In terms of role models, I think it's really important to look. I've spent quite a lot of time not only in the classroom, but sitting, observing lessons in a classroom and having a look at what messages are being sent. And often wall displays in secondary classrooms are a little bit of a mixed bag. And posters that are up there are not always that encouraging. I think something that we talk a little bit about and try and encourage trainees to, obviously they've got a lot going on, but when they get into the classroom, what sort of messages are being kind of portrayed within the classroom? So are role models modern? Are they relevant? And are they kind of interesting to younger people today? So this idea we talk about kind of who are the computing influencers. So we've got Carrie-Anne Philbin with her Girl Geek Diaries on her YouTube channel. Tech Me Out is a really extremely successful channel with over 18 million viewers and over 200,000 subscribers. And this channel is quite diverse, looking at technology in a really fun and engaging way. And then things like Instagram. So looking a little bit wider, who's on Instagram? You know, younger people today are sort of following people. So Coding Blonde is there on Instagram with her, you know, not a huge amount of subscribers, but there are many other kind of YouTubers and influencers on these channels that I think are worthy of talking about and looking at kind of who you could maybe put up there as more relevant examples. And Simone has some really wacky kind of little bit more STEM, where she cut a Tesla and sort of adapted a Tesla, but her channel has a lot of followers on her, and I think she's kind of really great to just sort of look and see, well, actually you can make homemade robots, and you know, you can kind of make some really good fun stuff with these kind of things. But I think as an educator, obviously at the moment we're in a slightly different situation, and I've put virtual school trips down there at the bottom. There's a lot of really great stuff going on virtually that you can follow. I'm always a big believer in, you know, get out, get your pupils out there, contact local companies. If you can't get in to see them, get the companies to come in and talk to your pupils. You know, if you can't see what the career is, then you know, get companies to sort of come in and talk to pupils. I've got BT Barefoot Scheme on there, Bletchley Park, and there's kind of a lot of really great educational programs going on. I was lucky enough to go on a number of school trips, which I think hopefully, well, I think they did engage students too, and they do keep in touch with me now, some of them that have gone into careers within computing and IT or taken degrees. So wall displays, one of those things I think as secondary teachers that sometimes you don't always find time to do. And there are a lot of really great pre-made material actually out there that you can use. I've put this one up here, which is part of the CS4FN, which is Queen Mary University. And they've got a huge kind of, they'll give you free magazines, free downloadable PDFs, and a lot of material that you can kind of use and make your classroom a little bit more creative. I'm going to just do my last slide. I've got a 1-minute timing. So competitions and challenges. You can have a look through the slides. I've given quite a few screen grabs. As you can probably see, I'm kind of really into encouraging engagement through outside of the classroom. What are you doing in lunchtime? What kind of clubs are you running after school? And I think they've been particularly successful at inclusive education, and I think it's important to remember to try and make your classroom not just gender balanced but also inclusive in what you're offering to pupils. So there's a number of really great competitions that you can engage in, and a bit of further reading, and all of my links are there for you if you want to kind of go and have a look or download any of the material. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Very, very insightful. So I particularly enjoy the statistics from the WISE campaign and hearing the mention of the Royal Society report. So really useful resources to go and have a look at later on. Louise, I've got a question for you. What can teachers do around differentiation of lessons now that we're in lockdown for different groups of students, like SEN students and EAL students? I'll have to swap back to you so you can actually answer that question. Actually, can you speak? Yeah,
can I
you can
speak?
hear,
you can hear me? My mic's on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's obviously teachers, we've gone through this huge shift, haven't we? And very quickly we had to get lessons online. And go from delivering a curriculum in the classroom that was following a certain timetable, and that then moved into online remote learning. And I think now as things have started to settle down a little bit, and perhaps planning for next academic year and in September, that's quite an important thing. And there's a lot of material on the NCCE. And as well as obviously the Include session, Catherine Elliott from Sheffield, so she has a lot of sort of help screen reading kind of technology, so that there is a lot of material already there pre-prepared to support teachers, and I think even getting access to Wi-Fi, and a lot of assumptions are made that children have got printers perhaps, so I think that whole inclusion aspect needs to be remembered, but there is support there from BCS and the STEM community to support children. And maybe Rebecca can comment on something that Raspberry Pi are perhaps doing that that can support children, as well as the government area of loaning laptops and hotspotting for children in areas that haven't got access to computers. So yeah, I think it's an important area as things move on.
Thank you very much, Louise. Okay, so we're now going to come to two other presenters. So the first presenter we're going to hear from is Wendy McLeod, giving a report from Computing at School, examples from the CAS community, so our specialist SEN communities, and then we're going to hear from Rebecca Franks, also speaking about unconscious bias, suggesting ideas for the classroom, and then supporting disadvantaged learners. So we'll now swap to Wendy McLeod.
Thanks, Beverly. Yeah, just to update people about the CAS communities, you may not know that we actually have 4 of our CAS communities are SEN specific in Bolton, Wythenshawe, Bootle, and most recently we have a brand new community that was started last year in Burgess Hill. And we also have a large number of the CAS membership who have expertise in SEND, and these people also present at community meetings. And just to draw your attention to one that happened recently, that was led by Matthew Parry. This is the Derby mixed community. They led a session focusing on inclusive computing, and Catherine Elliott spoke at that meeting. So it's important to be checking the CAS events page regularly to see what's coming up if you're particularly interested in inclusive computing and sessions focused on that. I recently held a webinar on inclusive computing, and this was extremely popular. We had 90 people attending. On the panel, we had Catherine Elliott, Rory Matthews and Emma Salt. And Rory Matthews and Emma Salt are community leaders. And Catherine Elliott was just mentioned just a few moments ago, leads on one of the leaders of the CAS Include working group, which produce materials to support teachers who are teaching children with special educational needs, and more information about that can be found in our section, the CAS Include, on the Computing at School website. I'm also delighted to draw your attention to the fact that on the 25th of June at 2 p.m, as part of our CAS virtual showcase, we are going to be having a session about the inclusive computing classroom. So if you're interested in that, please sign up on the CAS website. Our Our sessions are filling up very quickly, so please make sure you don't miss out on that. But inclusion is not only about including children with SEND, it's also about including children from all faith and all religious backgrounds. And that was brought to the forefront of my mind again recently when I was having a conversation with an advisor who works with a multi-academy trust with Jewish schools. And the question that he asked me was, how can we teach computing if the children in our schools are not allowed to use the internet due to the religious beliefs that they hold? And I think in this situation, it's important to do a number of things, really. The first one was for me to ask questions, to find out more about the situation, and also to be mindful not to cause offence in this particular circumstance. And as I asked more questions about the situation to improve my own understanding and appreciation of their personal beliefs, I was able to find out that the teachers could use the internet. So I was able to advise them to download resources and point them to resources that they could download and use the material in a slightly different way, but so the children could still have access to good quality resources. The other thing that I was able to highlight to this computing lead was, of course, the unplugged activities, which are so important and which teach a lot of the principles of the computational thinking. So just some tips there, and just to highlight how to include all children, regardless of their educational needs or their religious backgrounds, and to make sure that the computing is accessible to all children.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Really good contacts you've highlighted there through the CAS SEND community. So if anyone wants to get in touch with the CAS SEND community, please do let us know and we can put you in touch with them. And also unplugged activities, a favorite of mine. It's really, really good for embedding concepts and helping children to understand our subject a lot better. So we're now going to go to Rebecca Franks to hear about unconscious bias and suggestions for use in the classroom and supporting disadvantaged learners. Rebecca, I'm going to swap across to you to share your slides.
Okay, can you see me? Yep, great. Go back. So just oh, I can't see my, there we go. Hold on. Present, there we go. Oh no, can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
For some reason I can only see the speakers on the screen. I'm gonna have to move you down. Hold on, I got it. Right, sorry. So I'm gonna do two talks. First one's on tackling unconscious bias in computing, and then the second one is on supporting disadvantaged learners. So first of all, what is unconscious bias? And it's automatic experience-based thoughts or judgments that can influence our decision making. So I want everyone to just take this as an example. Picture a programmer in your mind and think, what is your automatic image of a programmer? And most likely it'll be something like this, which is a white male crouched over a desk, a couple of monitors in front of them. They might be wearing glasses, they might appear unfriendly or unsociable. And you know, I've met a lot of programmers and I know this isn't the real picture, but the media, films, TV, our parents possibly, and our teachers might actually, as we grow up, build our experiences showing us examples of this kind of thing, and that's what we start to develop. So our unconscious mind thinks, well, that's what a programmer is. And our unconscious mind can be really helpful, so it's constantly trying to make shortcuts for us in order to make us much more efficient in our day-to-day lives. And we use our prior experience to help us make those quick judgments. So in some cases, it's really, really helpful. So if you're about to cross the road and a car comes, your unconscious mind will go, danger, pull you back. you won't even have to think about it. It'll pull you back and stop you from walking out into that road. But actually our unconscious mind is great in those situations, but in other situations when we're not really paying attention, we can actually make quick decisions and judgments about things. So one example is CVs. If you've got a big pile of CVs for a job and you're trying to quickly filter through them, your unconscious mind can kick in, and those biases can kick in, and you can make quick decisions which can unintentionally exclude people from certain groups. So actually in that situation, it's not good. How does it influence the classroom? Well, unconscious bias has been long suggested as a reason why there is a lack of diversity in computer science. If children grow up with those images of computer sciences being white males staring at a computer screen, then children think that they don't fit that stereotypes, they might feel excluded. And our language and our activities can unintentionally exclude learners as well. So here's a typical question that learners might get asked in a computing lesson. How many devices that contain a microprocessor do you have at home? And now, when you first look at that, you might think that's quite an innocent question. What's actually wrong with it? But then start to think, well, who might it actually exclude in the classroom? And why do we think this question is okay to ask in the first place? And actually, more than ever, we know that there is a huge digital divide in our country. Not all children have houses filled with all these gadgets. And they might not even have the basics, like washing machines, for example. And this is actually a really personal question to ask learners, especially as they compare themselves to others in the classroom. So that kind of question can be quite excluding for certain people, like disadvantaged people. So this question can be easily changed if you just slow down your thoughts and think, okay, is this question appropriate? Right, so how can I change it? So how many devices that contain a microprocessor can you find in our classroom? They're all in a classroom, they all share that space, so they should be able to use it, or you could do the school canteen or something else, something where they all share. So just think about, questioning like that. But what can you do? It's very easy to come up with lots of different questions and not really know what your biases are and things like that. Our biases are not permanent, and that is a really good thing. Our brains are malleable things, we can change them. We can take steps to limit their impact in our classrooms, and these are my 3 top tips for limiting your own unconscious bias. And the first one is find out what your biases are. And Project Implicit by Harvard University, if you go on there, you can actually do a series of tests and it will tell you what your biases are, and that is really, really interesting to find out if you do have the time to sit and do that. Because once you know what your biases are, you can start to change them. Next thing is look at your resources that you've got and to see if there might be any biases in there. A big one, Christmas cards at Christmas, that was a typical IT thing to do. I know possibly not computing now, but it was a typical thing a few years ago to do. And that doesn't include people from all cultures and all backgrounds. So, looking at your curriculum and just seeing if you have got any biases in there that you've included and trying to change them. And the final one, which is really, really important, is to widen your social groups to include people from different backgrounds that are different to your own and different cultures as well. Because knowing more about other backgrounds, like Wendy was just saying, the more we know about other backgrounds, the more we can remove those biases that we've got. And they are unintentional, but it does happen. Unconscious bias is not an excuse, so we can't keep using this excuse all the time, but it is a reason, and there are things we can do about it. And once you are aware of your own biases, you can begin to correct them. And these 3 places are really good places to find out more about it if you want to. That third one on the bottom has absolutely tons of resources on unconscious bias. If you want to find more about it, I suggest you go there and have a look. So hopefully that was useful and gave you some information. The next talk is on supporting disadvantaged learners in the classroom. How do we define disadvantage? Now, in schools in England, disadvantaged learners are usually those identified that are eligible for the pupil premium grant. If you don't know what it is, these learners have received free school meals in the last 6 years, or looked after children, or they're a member of the armed forces. And it's been around quite a long time now, and it was there to raise the attainment of disadvantaged pupils and support children and young people from the armed forces. Can it make a difference? The latest report that the Education Endowment Foundation came back with, they're saying it is making a difference. Their report does say that the gap has closed. I don't think that's correct. I think the gap has narrowed, and there is lots of worry that with lockdown and everything that the gap is going to now get wider, and all that work that's been done is unfortunately going to go the opposite way, but hopefully it won't if people can start putting in things in place. But if you look at this quote, it says great things are happening around the country, and the thing that stands out is great teaching. So from this report, it says great teaching is the thing that makes the huge difference to the classroom. And so the key is you, the teacher. This is a really old graph, but I think it is such a good graph to see, and you've probably seen it before if you've seen a disadvantaged talk in the past. But I really think this is the most key thing to show that, you know, the most important person in the classroom is you to help these disadvantaged learners. So if we take a look at this graph, we've got the average student at the top. If an average student is in front of a poor teacher, they will still make 1 year's progress. If you look down the bottom, you've got the years. So it doesn't necessarily matter if an average student is in front of a poor teacher or a highly effective teacher, they're still going to make a year's progress. A disadvantaged student is only going to make half a year's progress, which is appalling. It's, you know, it's just not acceptable. But then if you look at a highly effective teacher, the average student is going to make over a year's progress, so 1.4 years progress, and a disadvantaged student is going to make even more progress. So it just shows how important it is for us to make sure that our pedagogy is great and we know what we're doing. And this is how we do it. So first of all, we look at things like the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, which is absolutely fantastic. Again, that's been around for quite a while, so you've probably seen it before, but if you haven't, it's a fantastic website. You can go on there and you can find out about the best strategies to use in the classroom, and this will have an impact on disadvantaged learners, but also everyone in the classroom as well. So it's not just exclusively for disadvantaged learners, and you can actually sort it based on the impact that you'll make. So that's, if you look at feedback, if you do feedback properly, so making sure that you read the research and you do it properly, then you can make 1 year's progress plus 8 months progress. So there's all these strategies on there that are fantastic for you to have a look at. But then what we want to find out about, actually, what about computing? Is there anything specific we can do in computing that can help our learners? And maths has been around ages. There's loads of research on maths. Computing research, nowhere near catching up, but it is getting better. And these are some fantastic things that you can do in computing to really support disadvantaged learners and your SEND learners as well, and all the other learners in the classroom. But great pedagogy is the key. So those are some fantastic strategies you can use. If you haven't got time to read that right now, what you can do is you can go to the pedagogy website. So Teach Computing has got a website. There's a short link there for the pedagogy page, and you can go on there and you can find out all about great pedagogy. It's all in bite-sized chunks for you to learn about it. If you've got a bit more time, you can go to the online courses. So you can go, there's a primary one and a secondary one, and you spend a few weeks doing proper courses that will step you through all those pedagogy techniques. And then you're a fantastic teacher and you want a few more ideas. Sorry, I'm running over a little bit. Then things like free open source software, paper-based homework, that's really important. And finally, that pupil premium grant. You've got the pupil premium grant in your school. I don't know how they use it in your school, but they should at least be a little pot of money for you to be able to buy a cheap laptop for your GCSE learners, for disadvantaged students, or a Raspberry Pi desktop kit, or whatever it is, so that they can use it at home if they need to. So tap into that if you can. And I hope that wasn't too rushed, but if it was rushed, you've got all these websites that you can look at later and look at it a bit more slowly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you so much. What I'll do, I'll not do the questions now, and I'll move straight on to Asini Leanne from Microsoft, looking at diversity in industry, highlighting the Microsoft BAME group. So Asini, will come to you now, please.
Thank you, Beverly. So I'm Asimi. I'm one of the interns in the Microsoft UK education team. So I'm currently on my placement year at Microsoft. So I'm in my third year of university, and I'm studying biochemistry at university, and I've come here to do a placement year and get to know what the working world's like. So when I applied to Microsoft, it actually was probably one of the easiest applications I did out of all the many ones that I did at the time, and probably one of the friendliest ones too. And so it was just a CV interview, and then I went to the the assessment centre, and then I got a position, which was very exciting. So there's 56 of us interns, and it might actually surprise you to know that 46% of us are from ethnic minority backgrounds, which is really great. I mean, it's meant that I've been able to meet so many people from really diverse backgrounds. And I think having a female CEO in Microsoft UK anyway has meant that there's been a rise in the number of females who work at Microsoft, but the number of people who are from BAME backgrounds is still relatively low, as it is in the rest of the tech industry. But it's actually really nice to see that despite this, there are actually so many people who are early in career at Microsoft, who are early in their journey, who are from these backgrounds, because you can actually see that the company is making an active difference to try and an active effort to try and get more of a diverse workforce. And personally, for me, as a person of colour, I find that it makes me feel so much more comfortable to be surrounded by interns and other people who look like myself and other people of colour, because they're the people that I can actually resonate with and learn from. And so it's really nice as someone who's early in their career to be able to see that these sorts of efforts are being made. I can appreciate them. So at Microsoft, we have voluntary employee-led resource groups. So these have been created basically to try and foster a diverse workplace. So for example, there's a woman at Microsoft ERG, there's a disability ERG, a Gleam ERG, and a BAME ERG. So I'm part of the BAME ERG. And this is a group that's made up of people who are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, as well as our allies and people who want to support us. So being part of this network has not only been given me an opportunity, and everyone else who's part of it, an opportunity to try and network with people from our backgrounds from across the business, but it's also actually introduced me to people of colour who I can actually look up to and inspire to be. As someone who's still at university, still really young, it's really helped me to realise that there are people who are like me, and it's helped me to realise that I do belong and I can thrive in this industry and in this business if I want to. So that's just one of the reasons why it's been great and why it's great to have this sort of program within this organisation. But also being part of the BAME ERG has really given me the chance to get to know lots of different cultures which are not normally highlighted in British society, and by all the sorts of events that they put on to help you understand different cultural backgrounds. And so it's helped me to understand different people and their different perspectives. More importantly, recently, since everything happened in the US and following the tragic death of George Floyd, the BAME ERG, I think, has been a really vital place to allow employees to have the opportunity to voice their opinion about how they feel about what's going on and the impact that it's truly made on them, and also to have the Microsoft leadership team to actually listen to us and to listen to members of this group and actually see that they take on what we've said and actually responded to it by making changes that we can visibly see now. It's really great to see, and it's really lovely to see that the power that the group has, and to realise that it's not just there to tick another box, but actually add value to the organisation. And even though I'm only an intern, I've still been given so much responsibility to do what I'm passionate about within this group, and actually make a difference. So this year I've been given the responsibility to organise a work experience week for students from BAME backgrounds, and actually this is what I've been focusing on this week, because this is the week that it was on. And we only just finished really shortly before I joined this webinar, and it's been really nice to see the impact that it's had on students, being able to open them up to the sorts of opportunities available at Microsoft and help develop the skills in them that they need, as well as the knowledge that they need to thrive in the working world. And it's been really incredible to see the sort of response that we've received from the students, even though it's only been a matter of hours since we finished. Some of them have used words to describe the week, such as proud and growth, and they've been able to overcome challenges, and it's really just nice to see how much of an impact it has on them and their lives, and how that at Microsoft we're able to sort of go about and make this sort of difference in people's lives. So all in all, you know, this are the sorts of things that I've been able to be involved with as someone who's an intern, but also a person of colour at Microsoft, and it's been really nice to actually be part of a company that's actively making an effort to be progressive and try and fight some of the stereotypes that are there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yassine. I could listen to quite a lot more about that, and very insightful for sharing with pupils as to what's available to them out there and how companies support all students, really. So we'll move straight on to Kojo Hazel from Wales, who is joining us today to discuss wellbeing and community work around your students and some of your personal experiences. So Kojo, over to you.
Thank you, Beverly, and good afternoon, everyone. Can I just say it's been, a real pleasure to hear sort of previous speakers and inspiring and thought-provoking messages. I was invited today here purely to share my experiences on a few personal opinions on matters which are pretty poignant in the current climate. I'm certainly not claiming to be an expert or to lecture on do's and don'ts, but I guess I'm here to explain how my experiences as a pupil, as an educator, and as a community coach have enabled me to become more aware of how important our roles and responsibilities that we have as educators in creating an environment of inclusivity. So the key theme from me is all about awareness. And for me as a youngster, I was certainly made to feel aware of my differences, being from a mixed parentage in a predominantly white school. There were no really role models in the teaching staff that I could relate to, and although I probably didn't think about it at the time, there was very little done to raise awareness on pupils' heritage, background, or minority communities. I do remember not being a fan actually of the school attempting to celebrate Black History Month and being asked to share with my peers about what it was like to visit Ghana, where my father was from. Now this might not seem like a bad thing, but I just remember feeling a bit singled out and almost uncomfortable at the time. I think schools willing to celebrate Black History Month and any other cultural celebration is great, but I also think it's important that these things are embedded into the curriculum and not just perhaps shoehorned in for a day or two in order to tick a box. So I guess what I'm saying is perhaps a more consistent approach to diversity would enable all pupils to gain a greater awareness without the potential of making minorities feel uneasy. In my time as an educator, I've had the pleasure of working in both Essex and Wales. I'm currently working in the heart of the Rhondda Valleys. I live in Cardiff, which is becoming increasingly more diverse. When I travel this sort of 40 minutes to my work, I'm in a completely different place in terms of demographics, and I find myself as an extreme minority at work and in a surrounding community. So this naturally makes me more aware of the importance of promoting inclusivity and equality, and I like to think that I'm a positive role model for the few minority pupils that we have at the school. But is this really sufficient enough to create an environment of total inclusivity and awareness? I personally don't think it is. The real question is, what are we doing as educators to promote awareness of minority groups? Or even better, what are we doing as educators to ensure that we understand and appreciate how what we say, what we do, what we ask of the pupils is promoting a positive experience for everyone. I certainly don't claim to have all the answers to the problems, but I'm certainly passionate about being part of the solution. And as educators, how much effort do we put into following the guidance that is out there? Without going into too much detail, This was mentioned a little bit earlier on. Do we create visually inclusive learning environments? Do we include minority ethnic identities in the curriculum? Do we involve minority ethnic people in school life? Another one is, do we encourage attitude and behaviour change? I agree with some of the guidance available that early intervention and prevention are key elements of an approach focused on ensuring we get it all right for all young children and people. Staff training opportunities are a great way to build the capacity of the school and to address and create inclusive learning environments. The ability to create consistency in approach and improve the competence and confidence of staff in this area is a great place to start, I believe. Okay, it's important to develop a school environment where values of inclusion and respect are uniformly applied to all students and their families. Now, this is the key area for me, including the community. So I've got a great example to share with you of a community project that I was involved in during the summer holidays, where local council in Cardiff provided funding to schools in an area which has a higher percentage of minority groups to have a provision where they could attend the school all day and participate in various activities. Now, I was invited to provide some sports activities, and it was very clear to me and the other staff that were working there that we were catering for an incredibly diverse group of children. So they came up with an ingenious idea of having one day each week where they would dedicate the learning and the activities to learning about the different communities of the children that we had there, which included, we had some Polish, Somalian, Filipino, some Roma travelers, just to name a few. This was incredible for the children themselves, but what it made even more valuable was they invited the parents each day to have lunch with us and to participate in the activities in the afternoon. That is an example for me of involving the whole community to help promote inclusivity and again raise awareness and gain appreciation of other people. Okay, so I'm very conscious of my time now, so I'm just like to finish off by mentioning the importance of technologies, which has been mentioned before, now to create the awareness we're all seeking. Okay, I'm extremely fortunate to be involved in a Microsoft education community, and in doing so I've been able to learn from people from all over the world, and there's just a wealth of resource available to us and our pupils that we simply must take advantage of. There really is another whole set of webinars that could be used to cover technology and improving inclusivity, equality and awareness, so maybe another time for that. But for now, just like to thank you for taking the time to listen and sharing my experiences, and I hope I've shed some light on the importance of awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Kojo. Again, we've heard the importance of positive role models for students, a consistent approach to diversity and raising awareness. So I think it's a continuous road of improvement and one that's going to lead us all to very great places. We're coming towards the end of our webinar. We've got 2 minutes left, so I'd like to just say thank you to everyone who's joined us online also. And also, as Wendy mentioned, to announce that the CAS Virtual Showcase is live. So that's a series of CPD webinars over a fortnight featuring a whole variety of topics, everything from robotics, diversity, programming, Ofsted, a whole load of different topics. So please do join us for those, and those are also free. If you know anyone who's interested and isn't a CAS member, please also encourage them to join. I think we've got 1 minute, so there's just one more question, but we could answer that via the CAS forum actually. So thank you very much everyone, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.